the topic for today's conversation is the rights and responsibilities of a delivery team. And I guess it's the topic that it will be interesting for many of the developers, because I guess most of you are part of some sort of delivery teams, and most likely have different types of tasks that you do. And the question is, what is that, the team that is doing delivery, what it should do, where is the boundary of what the team should do, and where it ends, where it starts, and should we be, talk to the business or maybe not talk to the business? What's the idea?
Yeah, so hi everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad that we were able to do this session in a different way. By the way, before I start answering those questions, like originally we were thinking to maybe do a presentation, but we found that maybe it would be much better if we actually had a conversation about those things, so that we can make it more fluid, right? So but it's like Ed and Andre, they are coordinating all the questions and stuff. So I'll try to make stuff up as I go along. Yeah. So I didn't come here with a planned script with answers. Yeah. So okay. This question about what the question was more like, what are the responsibilities of a team? Is that right, Andre?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
This is an interesting one, because I have a very particular way of seeing this, but it's important, before I even answer, is that we look at this from the same perspective. The perspective that I look at this is, we are all professionals, right? So we are professionals and we provide a service. Regardless if you are a permanent employee, consultant, contractor, you are a professional providing a service. And from that perspective, for me, the responsibility of a team and the individuals in the team is to satisfy our customers. It's like they have needs, they are hiring, they're paying for our service. And our job is to make sure that we mitigate those needs, right? So most of us being developers, we would do that through software, of course, through building and changing software. But ultimately, that software that we are working on needs to satisfy the needs of the people paying for our service. That's how I see that.
Sounds interesting. Yeah, so basically we have to satisfy the customer, yeah? And that's the main goal. Yeah?
The paying customer. This is an important distinction. I don't want to mix that with the end user or stuff like that. The satisfaction is for the paying customer, because there is a difference in here, right? Just
how do you call a paying customer? It's like a sponsor?
I think that in Scrum, if I'm not wrong, they call it the business owner.
Yes.
I don't like the Scrum terminology, by the way, but it's the one that I think. So but for me, is the person that is like, is the person that decided to have that department and say, hey, we need to hire a few developers, we need to assemble some teams because we have those things to do. That is, for me, the person that is my key stakeholder. Normally, like, would be the key stakeholder. I prefer that kind of nomenclature.
Fantastic. So we have to satisfy the needs of those who are like paying for the show, yeah? Like this.
Well, yes, the same way that if you just flip that around, like we pay a lot of people. We go to have we hire a person to do some work in our house, right? A plumber, a builder, or whatever. Like, their job is to satisfy our needs, right? So the same way that we go to a hairdresser, a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, or of course, that as professionals, they will give us information. We will tell them their needs, and with their area of expertise, they will advise us in how to achieve that. Mm-hmm. It's not. I'm not saying, by the way, oh, we just say yes, sir, yes, sir. We do everything they say on the how, but ultimately, the end result of our work, they need to be satisfied.
And it doesn't really matter what your role is in the team, yeah? So it doesn't really matter what your skills are. So here's the ultimate goal, yeah?
For me, this is general for any professional. Anyone that is paid to do a service, that's their ultimate goal.
Amazing.
Actually, yeah, I have a question here, because this year I have encountered several situations when the path between the developer and the actually paying customer is very long. There's so many layers between layers of interaction of who's ordering what from whom, and who's writing the specification, who is making this order of the system, and what to do in this kind of situations. Because I see that, you know, in this company, like in enterprises mostly, developer teams, delivery teams are turned into feature factories.
Yeah,
they just get some sort of spec that went through, you know, waterfall layers of somebody putting a signature in that, and then of course in the end you implement something that is not right. What to do for this kind of teams? And
yeah, so those are, it's difficult to have a recipe for that. And of course, that whatever I say might work in certain places and not in others, because we are dealing with people, and people will react in different ways. We quite often are guilty of our behaviors. Things happen to us because we also let them happen to us.
Yeah.
Right? For example, developers, on the other hand, there are a lot of developers that feel, hey, I don't want to get involved with the business. Or another thing that is very, very common, they complain about their product owner because the requirements are not being delivered properly, or is not well defined, or they are changing their minds. So they are always pushing that responsibility outwards, but they don't feel the need to say, hey, I will take over. So you know what, the requirements are not great. They are constantly change their minds, or it's not refined well enough. So instead of complaining, they say like, I will volunteer. I will go to my product owner and say, hey, we are struggling here for those reasons, but maybe we could work together. Would you want us to help and shape that? And all of a sudden, once you have that attitude, you are now working on with the same team. You are walking towards them, because a lot of developers just wait for them to work towards, like the product owners to work towards them, but they don't move. And I think that I always say to our teams, like just for background to other people, I spend most of my time in consultancies, right? So I was part of multiple different teams as developer, and I had many different types of relationships with my colleagues and with the business as well. Certain clients were more open, certain clients less open, and so on and so forth. And now I run a consultancy. So we have also many teams and stuff. So this is a common situation, like dealing with product owner is a common situation. And I felt most of the time, the developers themselves also create a barrier. So one thing that you could try is move towards them, and more importantly, own that relation, own that job. Pull the job to you and push them upwards. For example, if you pull them down, if you say to your product owner or whoever else and say, I need better defined requirements or a more stable requirements, what you are doing, you are bringing them down. You are asking them to tell you what to do, right? With more and more details. But if you pull them up and say, hey, you know what, we are struggling a little bit, but instead of you giving me more well-defined requirements, why don't I try to understand better what you are trying to achieve? And I will help you to create those requirements. I will help you to structure that backlog. And all of a sudden you are taking control. Yeah. That's the advice that I give to most of my teams. And that's what I've done my entire life. I don't reject opportunities to lead anything, basically. Yeah, that's how I feel.
And you know, sometimes it is doable, and I totally can also tell from my experience, it is doable that you can build that relationship, and it will start working. Sometimes because of the culture that was built before you came to the company, it's hard to break this kind of rules of the game. And yeah, in that sense, I guess, I mean, it's change your company or change your company.
Yeah, exactly. But like normally, like as you said, you really need to be a very specific type of person to reject that offer to work together, you know? Mm-hmm. So I think that if you are skillful in offering that help, you are not a threat. You are not telling them that they're not doing their job. You are just saying, hey, maybe you can work together so that we can improve this. We can improve the output of our work, right? So the outcome, in fact.
That sounds good. Sandro, I have a question to you. So it's clear that like a deep collaboration between like a business and developers is important for a business. But sometimes what we see in software development that there is this still like a developers want to focus on the technical things, yeah. And how do we get developers interested in going to Gemba, yeah, going to the place where work happens? And actually, what would be the personal benefits? So it's clear why it's important for the company, for the team, but what is a personal benefit for a developer? Why they should do this? Because it's so convenient when there's some product owner in between, like a spoon feeding you with requirements and problems, and you just focus on the technical problems, yeah? So how would we sell this idea that, okay, as a developer, you really have to solve problems and talk to the customers and so on?
Yeah, so I went through that journey myself, right? So mostly the beginning of my career, I didn't care about the business, and I have no shame to say that because that's exactly how I felt. I said, look, I don't want to know about the business. And I joined consultants even like because I could change the business very often and just focus on the technology, and I didn't really care to learn a specific business in depth. And that's what I've done. But that has a side effect. Yes, I was focusing more on the technical side, but the side effect, I was always quite unhappy about certain things. And those things were a constant, even changing organizations or changing projects. The things that were making me unhappy were, I was being told what to do. I was given a deadline. My opinions were not being listened to, right? So that was a common. But then, for example, if this is happening, every time I change project, every project that I go with, this happens again. At some point, you need to stop blaming other people or organizations, start looking at yourselves like, am I doing this? Right? Why am I incapable of having people listening to me? Because it's not only that you want to be focused on the technical, because there is a very selfish aspect to it. So someone will pay my job, but I will define what I do and what I don't do. And then I don't want to have any sympathy. I don't want to understand what they do, but I want them to understand what I do. So when I complain, they do something about it. So when you understand that, of course, that people will not treat you how you want it because you don't behave in a way that is welcome. So then what changed in my head? I wanted to have more control of what I do. I wanted to be part of the decision-making process. But then, for example, one thing that it took me a while to understand, if I want to be part of the decision-making process, and that even means influencing deadlines or what needs to be done or how the company should approach certain things. So if I want to go to the decision-making table, let's say, I need to ask myself, what do I bring to that table? Why would those people want me to be there? Because it's fine for me to want to be in that table and making decisions or contributing, but like, what am I bringing? And if the only thing I bring is some deep knowledge of the technical side, but I cannot explain how those technical things would influence the business, I don't bring anything. And in order for me to have a deep understanding of what those technical work, how the technical work would influence the business, I need to understand the business well as well, so that I understand what I'm proposing and how it would influence. So with this in mind, it's not that I say like, oh, I want to learn every single business in the planet, but I would like to have more autonomy. I would like to have more influence. I would like to have more control. And for that, I need to start going beyond the technical sphere so that the technical work can have that impact.
Okay. What could
Actually,
you do?
there's a
Like
question in Slack, which is really about layering of different management hierarchies. So if you have, let's say, a management centric end user or like the stakeholder, maybe I can just read it. How about situations where the product you're working on has a stakeholder that is more management centric versus end user who uses this product more than the stakeholder or person paying for it, like in-house application, for instance. So if the management is telling you what to do, what's kind of the recipes. I mean, you already told that, right? But maybe reiterate on that.
Yeah, as I said, like not everything I'm saying will work we are dealing with people, and people have fears, they are insecure, or they might see certain things as a threat, or they say, oh, this is my job and I'm going to do my job. And so I don't want to say, hey, just do that, that's going to work, because I know that it's not like that, right? But there are things that have a bigger chance to work. Again, like a lot of people that do micromanagement. I'm a manager myself today. Like I've been running my company for 8 years now, and we have like more than 120 people now, right? So I understand also, like, because I've also been on the other side of the table, and you understand, like, for example, when you start getting closer, first, a manager that managed too close, or the famous micromanagement, you have a few options. You can just blame that person for every evil in the world, right? And you are the poor person that is being micromanaged. That's a way of living. That's not how I live. But another one is to say, okay, why does this person feel the need to be so close? What are the needs that this person has that are not being met? And again, like, I know that it's not going to work for everyone, but I think that there is a big chunk of my life that I was successful in doing that, and like pushing those people up again. And so, like, okay, I feel that you are very interested in the number of story points that we have and how we do these, and you want to have details of this. What is your need that is not being met? Because this is waste. If you get too close, it's waste. So how can we give that confidence? Because it's all about trust. It's all about building that relationship. If the relationship is good and there is trust in who does what, management becomes much softer, becomes more about coordination of the work, who's going to do what, where we are going, than actually managing the progress of each individual. So it's try to understand that, but you need, if you want to change the situation, you will need to try to address that person's need.
And then you need to invest some time.
You need to move towards them. You cannot just keep blaming them, because that's not going to solve your problem, and moving companies will not solve your problem again, because you might have another person that is similar, right? So then you just build the skill to change them.
Okay, good. Okay, let's move on then. So we have, we know what is our primary responsibility. We know that we want to deal with customers and satisfy their needs, and these are the paying customers. So for that, we have to compose a team. Yeah, so there should be a team. Sandro, could you maybe explain maybe what would be the ideal composition of the team? Like who is in, who is out? Like what skills should be there? What roles? Like what people? Like let's say product owner, scrum master, business analyst, maybe. Yeah. So who is in, who is out? So what is this ideal composition of the team?
This is I need to think a little bit about it, because this is a very difficult question to answer. For example, as part of being a consultancy, or now owning a consult, building teams for projects, assembling teams, disassembling teams is part of our job, right? And there are a few different elements in here. I'll try to see if I'm structuring my thoughts, because I'm thinking about those questions now, right? So there is an element of the specifics of the project. For example, what are the kind of skills that are needed for that specific area? So then you will be talking about areas of specialism. So for example, answering your question, do we need a BA? Do we need a person with some specific technical skills or whatever? Then of course that will vary according to that context. There is an element of size of the team, and I'll tell you why I don't like the idea of having teams that are too small. Teams of 3, teams of 2, teams of even 4 or 5. And I'll tell you why. Because the teams that are too small, like 4, they are really fragile. They are fragile because like someone can resign, someone is absent for whatever reason, and also they don't have enough skills in the team to be very versatile. They're way too small and too fragile. Of course, that I think that when people talk about the two pizzas team or the 7 + 2 - 2, I think that 7, 8 is a good number normally, because it's enough people to have variety, to cover quite a lot of skills, and it's strong enough that even if 2 people resign or they are needed somewhere else, it doesn't impact the project. Yeah, so I think that there is an element of size in there. Then there is an element of succession plan as well. So this is an interesting one from the same reasons, because like the team is assembled for a specific mission, but that mission can be quite a long running mission, right? Not the same people might stay in that mission for too long. So you also need to have like a succession plan. You need to have a few people that when you assemble that, for example, if you lose the person with more experience, how we would cater for that. So this is an important aspect for the person that is assembling that team. Like a football or any sports team is a great example of those things, right? So you have a good degree of a mix. Like take football teams is a fantastic example. You have many different types of profiles. You have players that are more versatile, that they can cover. If someone is, I don't know, someone is injured, they can play defense, or they can play midfield, or can play on the right wing. So I'm saying they have that versatility. They're not great at any one of those things, but they provide that stability to the team, right? But of course, there might be some specialists. You might need to have a top scorer or your goalkeeper. You cannot just improvise a goalkeeper. A goalkeeper is a specialist, right? You need to have that specialist. You need to have a backup for that specialist as well, but he's a specialist, and very few people would cover for a goalkeeper. You might want to distinguish your team to have some deep specialists as well. You might want a very good scorer, or even a middle field, someone that would articulate. So you need to have that in mind when assemble that. And a mix of seniority levels is also important as well. Of course, like it's impossible. This is my wish list, by the way, but like you very rarely are able to compose a team with all that would satisfy all those criteria. You end up composing a team with whoever you have, right? But for example, different levels of seniority is also important, because I realized that, well, take the football teams as an example, put a lot of stars in a team and they don't perform. They just keep clashing with each other. You know, they spend far more time arguing with each other than actually trying to achieve a goal. So those are the things. But like in terms of if you need a BA, if you need a QA, if you need, that will vary. Normally I like having those roles. What I don't like are the admin process roles. I don't like a scrum master in the team, right? And if I can get rid of the product owner, I would get rid of the product owner as well. I have a preference for having a business analyst more often than not, than I'm actually a proxy product owner.
Yeah, actually, there's a question in Slack. Sandro, do you observe that the size of delivery teams is growing because of the complexity of the software that is being implemented by that team? So from, let's say, 7 people, you grow to, I don't know, 20, and suddenly, yeah, it becomes unmanageable, and you get suboptimal stuff.
Yeah, so this is a good question as well. I normally don't like the idea of growing too much, because then it becomes, you have too many streams to manage in one team, and then you need to break the teams, right? You need to start breaking the teams into smaller teams. I like the idea, as I said, like 7 for me is a very good number. I really like teams of 7. But as you break them down, that's where it gets tricky. I think that there is the best book that talks about that I'm aware of is the team topology. So that book is really, really good. I personally don't like, I met like one of the guys in one of, he's a great guy. I don't like the names that they gave to the teams particularly, but the idea is the same. I don't want to throw this is a minor detail, but the way that they divided those teams, for me, it makes sense in a way. But there is an art in there, you know, like, so that there's stream aligned teams. Like I have an issue also with, because like the question had specifically about the UX designer and front end and back end and stuff like that. I have a problem sometimes with having everyone being cross-functional, or so I like the specialists, but it creates, for example, if you have different QAs in different teams, I think normally is a good idea. You have a specialist in an area, or the front end or UX, like as part of the question. This is, or an SRE, so you have a specialist in there. But if you always have those specialists, the amount of work, the volume of work that those specialists get over time is not the same, right? You might have for a period of time, you have far more work in the back end than you have in the front end, or you have far more work for UX, for example, is a thing that you do a lot at the beginning. You tend to, you never stop, but you slow down a bit in the system if you're not making a lot of front-end changes, let's say, right? So balancing too many specialists in a team becomes complicated. Another thing that you want is consistency as well, because if you spread the UX people across multiple teams, they also need to have a cohesive way of working. They need to have agreements across teams. You cannot have each part of the system having a completely different UX guidance, right? So the same way developers need to standardizing coding standards and things like that, all those other professionals, they also need to standardize the way that they work. And when they are all spread, it's good because the team is stronger. However, you weaken the discipline. So then you need to rely on communities of practices. You need or the tribes or whatever else that Spotify does, right? So there is an art in there.
Do you have any kind of, period or time frame for which during which the person should stay in the team, or let's say it should be at least a month or should be at least a year, so that the team kind of finds that bond and works together cohesively, or is it just business oriented and you can switch people as you like?
Yeah, I have a preference for stable teams. I think that people end up staying in organization. You normally have far more pleasure or more headache given who you work closely, right? So if you have a good group of people that you enjoy working with, the actual work becomes secondary, right? So because you stay there because you like those group of people, so you can tolerate work that you don't like very much, but you like working with those people. While when you don't like the work with those people, you really need to compensate that somewhere else. But normally you will not be happy, regardless of, even if the work is very cool, but if the people that interact is not. So I have a preference for a stable team. So when you are able to create a stable team is already difficult enough, right? So putting 7 people that will really get along and work as very well together, respect their differences and stuff is already a challenge, and it takes time. So I would try not to break that once you achieve that. However, people also want different things. Those 7 people, let's say, that are in the team, they have different aspirations. They have different needs as well. At some point, that project or that stream of work, it's not what they want to do moving forward. They want to experience something else, or they've been working on that for far too long. So a rotation, this is why I like a team that is a little bit bigger, because you should cater similar, again, like lose the football team or sports team. Every season, they will make a few changes. They will make a few players go and they will play for other teams, even sometimes in different positions, and they will bring other people in. And they will rejuggle how certain positions within the team. So it's important that you do that, because you are always bringing some fresh blood. So someone joined a new project. 2 people are bored of that project. They go somewhere else. They will be excited with the new project. The new people that come in, they will be excited of that project. So you always have that need. So for me, this is quite important as well. It's less about the time for me. I don't think that is about the time. Is about how much you are enjoying working with those people or in that stream of work. Right. Oh, sorry. And before we move, normally healthy teams, people don't want to move very quickly. If you have too many people asking, hey, I want to do something else, or you are resigning and stuff, there is a problem in there. Normally, when you have a very nice team of people, tend to stay together for longer.
Yeah. So there's another question from Slack, actually 2 questions. The first one would be, so you prefer team full of like a team of full stack engineers or team of specialists, or both, or mixed?
Neither. So normally a mix is better. I find that it's very difficult to answer that in a way that, oh, this is the right thing. I don't think that there is a right thing, because context will be different. I have preferences, right? So not knowing anything about the context, my preference would be to have, as I mentioned, a few people that are that are more versatile. So let's say a team of 7, I have 3 people that are very versatile. They can do a bit of front end, they can do a bit back end, they can do cloud, they can sit down with the business and talk about user story. They might not be great, they might not be a star as a front end engineer or a cloud engineer or stuff like that, but they know enough and they like that generalist. They like being involved in everything. This is a characteristic that some people have. They want to acquire more knowledge and do a bit of everything. And those people are extremely valuable, right? However, if you only have a team of generalists, you have a team that is very mediocre, right? It's a team that will be stable, they will be doing an okay job, but they will never really innovate. They will never really bring those new ideas because they are okay. So that's when you really need the specialists as well. So having people that really understand, that are really focused in that area, because they are the ones that will be pushing the boundaries, that will have that passion to say, hey, we can push the limits of our front end, we can do micro front end, we can use this technology. So are the people that will be pushing that. Our generalists normally don't do that. Yeah. So that kind of mix for me is when you can get them, that would be for me my preference.
Mm-hmm. And another question, which I think it's closely related. If you come to the team as a newcomer, new joiner, and you see that the team is not living up to the standard, doesn't follow the TDD practices, XP practices, nothing, or maybe following them in the bad way, what would be your actions as a, I don't know, senior developer, senior engineer to kind of embrace these practices?
Yeah, so driving technical change, like it's been part of a big chunk of my life, right? So I've been talking about that in the craftsmanship world forever. So I cannot even remember how many times I answered, oh, how do I convince my team to adopt TDD? Or how do I convince my manager to adopt? So there are many, again, as always, we are dealing with people. So I cannot just say, do that, that's going to work, because it just doesn't work like that, right? But there are a few things that I learned that are anti-patterns, that if you do it, probably there's a big chance that it's going to backfire. One of them is you go to someone and tell them they are not doing a good job. And say, hey, you know what? You are not professional. Like if someone comes to me, like let's say the 3 of us here in this call, or anyone on Slack channel and stuff, you are there doing your job, trying to do the best you can, but you use certain techniques, right? Someone else that uses different techniques, all of a sudden come to you and say, hey, you know what, Sandro? You are not professional. You are not doing your job well. And I say, why is that? Because you don't use the practice XYZ. And I said, well, screw you, right? So I would be extremely pissed off. At that point, I already created a friction. I don't want to speak to that person. So there's zero chance that this person will ever convince me of anything, because they already came in judging me, judging that I don't do a good job, right? That I don't have the right motivation. And there's no way that we are going to reconcile that if the person will be having this attitude towards me. So I need to be careful not to do the same. So when it comes to driving technical practices, the biggest mistake that we all made, well, I made certainly, is we go with a solution to those people. We say, hey, you need to do this. You need to work in this way. And the person is like, I don't even understand which problem we are trying to solve here.
Yeah. You need Kubernetes.
Exactly, right? So you need TDD, you need Kubernetes, you need whatever, micro front ends, right? So I think that you need to be very tactful. So first of all, it's like, let's figure out if we are seeing the same problem. Start there, because like if you start from the solution, you already start from a confrontational perspective. If you move the discussion up and say, hey guys, what are the problems that we see in our current ways of working? And all of a sudden now you are building together. we are saying, hey, let's sit down and see, like, do we see those problems? Because if someone is not even seeing the same problem that you see, there's no way that they're going to get by that solution, right? So I would start from there. And then once we start trying to make sure that we see and you need to also, again, to be tactful. So like, but don't you think that we end up taking too long to release something? That sometimes we finish development quickly, but then we need to go through this long QA process. And quite often we get a lot of bugs coming back, and that disrupts the flow. It creates a lot of waste, because then we are already started a new sprint, and now we need to fix the bugs from the previous sprint, or even 2 sprints before, depending on how long the QA. So, well, maybe there is a better way of working here. Maybe you could automate some of those things. Maybe you could bring those QA guys to work with us. And all of a sudden now, you have a common problem that you defined, and you are discussing together solutions to the problem, instead of saying you need to do TDD. So you see what I'm saying? So I think that this is probably a better way for you to start driving. And another thing, if you are proposing something, let's say that the 3 of us are in the same team, and we have a very good relationship as friends. We go out, we have a drink, you know, like we have a very good relationship. It's much easier for me to say, guys, what we are doing sucks. You know, there is this technique. I can be far more friendly and not forceful, but like I can be more precise. Okay, maybe you should do that, because I have a trust relationship with you. When I do those things, you are not taking as I'm criticizing you. You know that because we are friends, I'm talking about what I think that could be better, and that's an open discussion. Yeah. Sometimes that friendship and relationship doesn't exist. And there is a lot of convincing that someone needs to do. So again, you can use all the other things that I mentioned before, but another thing is make sure that you are good at what you are proposing, because this is what I've seen going wrong with people trying TDD. They said to the whole team, oh, we need to adopt TDD, or worst thing possible, a Scrum Master that doesn't even know how to type on the keyboard goes to the team and say, hey guys, you need to do TDD, and say, oh yes, Mr. Scrum Master, how do we actually do that? Oh no, you should do that. This is a good practice. Great, that's the keyboard. Tell me how you do that. And the guy can barely touch. So once you are proposing something, you need to at least be reasonable at it, so that people can say, well, you know what? Oh, I see, I could follow that. I understand what we need to do. Right?
Yeah. And actually, there are 2 more questions coming in. Well, you actually mentioned long QA phases in some teams. What would be the best ratio between devs and QA people in a team? Oof. in your experience?
It's again like it depends on the size of the team. Like let's go back to the team of 7, as I was discussing, right? I think that 1 is enough. But also it depends on the state of the system that you are in. So for example, if you're working on a very horrendous, as we have a few of those projects, we do a lot of software modernization projects, right? So we take a lot of projects that are over 2 decades, they grew, and now they are in a crazy state, and they have too many people working on it. So the size of your system, the complexity, the state of the system also impacts in the number of QA that you have, because like you might not be able to automate everything that you need to automate as you are iterating, right? So the cost of those automation might be way too big, and you need to do that gradually. And if you want to do the release more often, even when the system is in that state, you cannot wait for 6 months to do all the automation. You need to do partial automation. So then you need far more, you need to rely far more on a formal QA process to make sure that other things are not broken. But as the system starts falling into place, as you start modularizing your system, the modules that you are working on are more separate, like they have like a boundary from the rest. You can test around those boundaries. You need to rely less on a formal QA process, at least for that area of the system. So, but normally, if I had to guess, no context, 1 QA, and I normally prefer the QA to be working, as we say, we shift left, right? So the QA is helping us to define what needs to be done. And then they do just some high-level manual tests, just like a smoke tester, if you prefer, just to see if everything is okay. I don't like the idea of QAs doing automation, by the way. I really don't like the idea.
So what QA should be doing then? So what's the primary responsibility of a QA in the team if you have a QA?
We've been discussing that for quite a few years now. And I don't think that I have a fully formed opinion yet, but I can tell you where I am now. What I don't like is to use QAs that normally are not great developers to do the automation of the most difficult tests that we have in the system, normally at a system level, at acceptance level. So that they are the systems that will test systems as black box or integration across systems. And those are the tests that are hardest to build and the most difficult to maintain. And they tend to take hours to run because they're badly done. So tests at that level, for me, we should have the best engineers in the company writing them because they are really difficult to it's not that they're so difficult to build. It's not about building one of those tests. But when you have loads of them, you need a testing strategy of how you're going to write tests at a system level, how you're going to do the integration with other systems or services and external systems and stuff. And you need a lot of engineering to do that well in a way that they are not brittle and they can run in a few minutes and not in a few hours. And there's no way that a person without a strong engineering background will ever do that well, right? So then, for me, this is an engineering problem. But imagine sorry, it's a long answer to your question, because for me, this is still a big problem. I believe that every professional should bring something to the table, right? So a developer will bring engineering experience, coding experience, and stuff like that. Someone that has a platform engineering, they will bring cloud or automation or whatever else. Someone that is a UX person that someone mentioned in one of the questions. They are good at user experience. They are better than anyone else in the team, right? So everyone should bring someone, let's say a product owner, a good product owner. They are better than anyone else in understanding what business-wise, what we need to do. Those professionals, they bring something to the table. The tester needs to be the same. They need to bring testing knowledge. How do we test systems? But it cannot be automation. It cannot be unit tests, cannot be acceptance tests, because this is what developers do. So if that's the only thing that they bring, that's not enough to justify them. So, but testing, there is a full discipline in testing. So what are the key techniques for testing? And then what you can do is to think about testing is a subset of quality assurance. For example, sometimes you talk about QAs. QA is quality assurance. Testing is a subset of it. So if you think about quality assurance as a discipline, then quality assurance goes across the entire process. Then we can think about, okay, what is our lead time here? So from idea to software in production, what is our process? And then you apply quality assurance at that level. And then you have multiple levels, right? So if you think about quality assurance as a discipline, then I would love professionals with that skill, but not test automation. Then they justify their place in the system. Yeah.
Awesome. You mentioned engineering practices, Sandro, and I want to ask you, what is the a minimum amount of engineering practices a developer should be following now? Because if we remove so we are kind of trying to push as much quality to the development, quality assurance work, so in this case, what is the minimum for a developer?
I think that the engineering practices, they exist at different levels, right? So in the software craftsmanship world, we tend to talk about engineering practices at the low level, at a very micro level. We tend to talk about test-driven development and unit tests. We tend to talk about pair programming. We tend to talk about refactoring, simple design. So those are all practices from extreme programming. But they operate in the micro, sorry. But there are engineering practices that goes all the way up. So in the micro side, in the within team, on the closer to code, I like the ones within extreme programming. For me, they have the best set of practices, but they also have set of practices that are beyond the team. They have whole team metaphor and things like that, and planning and things like that. They are all extreme programming practices. I think that there are practices at the bottom. Those are the XP programming, the ones that I like the most. But then, for example, you start moving up. Before you start picking up user story, I'm a big fan of doing some thinking up front in terms of design and architecture, right? So I by no means, I was misunderstood a few times when I said that. By no means I'm saying we should go back to the 90s when I started and do those big design up front and 9 types of diagrams from the unified process. I'm not saying any of that. But before you start, like for example, in terms of planning the next three months of work, teams don't plan anymore. We went from a big design up front to no design at all. We went from one extreme to the other. And now what happens after 20 years of Agile, I'm not going to blame Agile because that would be a cheap scapegoat. But because we didn't want to do waterfall, we didn't want to do design up front, we start moving the needle, but then the needle didn't stop at the middle. It just moved to the other extreme. So now we have a generation of developers that have absolutely no clue how to architect systems, how to design systems. And they keep building those horrendous systems. And now, worse, they are doing that with services, right? Before, at least they were doing the same monolith, that it would be easier to start refactoring. Now they do that with, you go to conference, people go on stage and say, oh, we have 700 services. And so like, how is that a good idea? Right? How on earth this is a good idea? And then the next speaker comes in and they want more. Oh, 700? Oh, we have 973, right? So that crazy thing that they are doing now. So I think that in terms of back to engineering practices, understanding design at different levels. For example, the next level up from the small classes and stuff is what Uncle Bob calls what is it? The blueprint in clean architecture, if I'm not wrong. That's where domain-driven design will come in, interaction-driven design, clean architecture. But then you have also at the higher level, you have architecture in general, serverless architectures, microservice architectures, cloud computing. So those are for me also part of engineering techniques that people need to know. And quite often those at a higher level have a far bigger impact in the long term than the small mess that you create on the low level. And I think that those are engineering practices. So for example, before we go crazy, start picking up user stories. Like for example, what we are doing now, we are becoming more structured. So like, let's plan for the next quarter. Let's plan. So let's have a look at our roadmap. So for example, we became a little bit better now to go back to planning. So let's look at our high-level roadmap for the next 3 to 6 months. What are the core features, core epics that are going to come in? What kind of architecture we will need to start building so that we can support that? And for me, this is all part of engineering practices.
Perfect. So we're actually running out of time, so I'll accelerate a bit.
Already?
Yeah, literally like this. So time runs. So I'm going to ask you a number of questions quickly. So let's not spend on each question like more than 1 minute, okay?
All right.
So let's be very short. Okay, let's add more value. Okay,
Blitz.
Sandro, question number 1, Blitz, yeah. What would be the most important piece of advice you would offer to someone who is building up a new team? One advice, only one advice.
Get the more exciting people you have in the organization. The ones that are very excited about doing that, take them.
Okay, what would be the 3 books you would recommend on building teams? The best book. So I want to build the perfect team. 3 books.
I don't know a single one that would give a good advice that could be easily applicable. But I like the team topology, although it will not tell you how to build a great team, but it will give an idea of how teams should be composed and interact with each other.
Okay, explain the cost and benefit of pair programming. Quickly. So can you sell pair programming?
The pair programming helps you to spread knowledge across people so that you don't have key dependency. However, it can also be very wasteful if what they are doing is everyone understands what needs to be done. So you need to balance that. I don't like the idea of pairing 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Fantastic. From your experience, what is the most popular dysfunction of a team, and what can we do about this popular dysfunction? The most popular one. You have seen a lot of projects.
A mismatch between expectations mismatch of expectation between business and technology.
What can you do about it? About this mismatch?
Work closer to each other. Both sides needs to walk towards each other.
Okay.
That's
nice.
hard, man.
Andrew, question from your side.
Oh yeah, Sandro mentioned team topology, so I'm happy. That's it.
Okay, yes, Sandro, the last question from me, and then we go to Slack, and maybe there will be more questions. So, the most important career advice you would give to your to younger self?
You are far more than a software developer.
You're far more than a software developer.
Than just a software developer. Yeah.
Wow.
I will write it down.
Yeah, just write it down. It says everything. Okay, Andrew, could you wrap up somehow?
Well, I think that we can actually, talk like that for, I don't know, the whole day. Actually, I'm looking at the questions that was prepared, and I had in mind. I mean, we just covered maybe 3 of them out of 25, so it's easily we can expand this session. But yeah, but anyway, thank you very much for your insights. Thank you very much for your energy and for the answers. It was really pleasant.
My pleasure.
For us to have you.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure to be with you all and Dev Eternity for another year. And I hope to see you in person soon. And I'm more than happy to do this more often. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Sandra. Okay, stay in touch. See you.
Bye-bye.